Hello everyone, my name is Kai Panlaki and I have done my presentation on employment agreement forms for Chick-Fil-A. And I had done this presentation solo. So, what is an employment agreement form? Well, it is a legally binding written contract. It has a listing of employer-employee rights, rules, and obligations that they must follow. The employee agrees to work at the company for a specific period of time, which is listed in the terms section of the contract, in which the company commits to keeping the employee for a set amount of time unless they had violated the contract. So the purpose for this form is used to describe the employee-employer relationships, in which it lays out the rights, responsibilities, and obligations for both parties during the employment period. But is it necessary to have this form? Most employers don't typically need them, but when it is needed, it is attached to an employment contract, in which the terms of the contract are determined by state and federal laws, which are also known as common laws, in which for Chick-fil-A's case, an employment agreement form is attached to every employment contract, especially those under the age restriction and aren't applying for higher paid positions. The employment agreement uses are to define the age requirement. So for Chick-fil-A, the employee must be at least 13 years old to work at the establishment. They require dependable employees to maintain a good character and outgoing personality. They must have a flexible schedule and reliable transportation. But in regards to transportation, they must also have a legal good driving record. And for this type of employment, it is at will. When having an employment agreement form, usually the statuses are at will employments. In terms of employment agreement restrictions, they're also known as restrictive covenants. They restrict what employers and employees can do during and after the employment relationship. So this typically relies in restrictions regarding termination and confidentiality. So in regards to termination, the employer and employee may terminate the employment for any reason or no reason at all, but it must take place after the set period of time has passed. And in regards to confidentiality, it protects the employer from an employee disclosing company information to third parties during and after the employment period. So onto the actual employment and agreement form, I had included a actual screenshot of my employment agreement form for Chick-fil-A. So the first section I'll be discussing is the at-will employment section. So as I stated previously, termination by either the employer or employee can be made at any time after the duration of the employment period has passed, in which will be under the term section, where I will discuss further in the next slide. All employment contracts that include an employment agreement usually consist of at-will employment statuses. So, as I stated earlier, this would typically be for those in high school or, doing part-time or having lower paid positions, not typically positions, those who are being higher paid in corporate or management positions. So as I stated in the previous slide, the term section is probably the most important section in the contract, since it states the specific amount of time the employee must work at the company in which they can leave afterwards or stay. And this can be determined by the employer as well, whether they want to offer to keep the employee or have them or let them go in regards to how they did during that set period of time. The dates listed afterwards are days determining how long an employer must notify an employee for any reason listed in the section. So this may include the termination, regarding their last paycheck, or anything that may change or impact their employment statuses. As for the restrictive covenant, or in other words, restrictions of the form, for Chick-fil-A, this includes a non-disclosure clause, confidentiality restrictions during or after the employment. So this would be disclosing company regulations or company rules that they may have. And Chick-fil-A includes a non-solicitation restriction as well. So basically that means that the employee cannot persuade other employers to leave their position just because they may be reaching the end of their employment period, or for any other reason for why they may be doing it. And finally, I will be discussing the vacation and waiver sections. So Chick-fil-A has a mandated 10-day vacation day period for all employees, regardless of their employment statuses. And in terms of waivers for at-will employment employees, failure to comply to the terms and conditions of the employment contract can result in the employee not receiving a waiver for the term, or a term that they may want to stay employed. Maybe they want to stay employed longer, or for any other reason. If they fail to abide by the rules stated in this contract, they will not be eligible to. And we have reached the conclusion of employment agreement forms for Chick-fil-A. So as I stated, they are always attached to at-will employment contracts. They use this form mainly for employees under the age restriction, so 13 to 17, the high school student age group, or other age groups that fall within that category. And for those who aren't applying for higher paid positions. And although the form isn't necessary at times, when it is a legally binding contract that the employee must abide to for the term of employment, and is required among many other companies, despite it not being necessary. And I have reached the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.